Good day, everybody, and welcome to 20 Minutes on Ice, powered by the Garage Door Sports Network. I'm your host, Ryan, and as always, in the co-host position is Nick. We are coming to you live on Twitch, or if you're listening to the podcast version, thank you for downloading. We've got a great show coming up for you, so let's get right to our opening face-off. Today on 20 Minutes on Ice, we have a special guest, Mike Mazzei. He is from Behind the Net podcast. He's also a contributor on theleafsnation.com. We're going to be getting into the John Tavares injury from earlier in the week. Nazem Kadri suspended in the playoffs again, so we'll be touching on that. And of course, we do have to go around the league and look at all the first round series. And even though we are live, that doesn't mean we won't have our usual segments. We have players of the week, 3 hot, 3 not, and then we finish up everything with the randomizer. But I do have to introduce first my co-host. He once fell out of the bleachers just to catch a foul ball, Nick McVicker. Nick, how's it going?
I did no such thing. I caught the foul ball while standing. Thank you very much, Ryan. Actually, I haven't. My dad did, though. My dad caught a screamer at the Rogers Center, barehanded, down the foul line.
So he's that guy on all the blooper reels who's fallen out of the stands.
Well, no, he was like fifth row, and he actually caught it bare hand, barely even knocked him over.
Barely knocked him over, but he did get knocked over, you're saying.
A little, just a little.
As I mentioned off the top of the show, we do have a special guest this week, Mike Mazzei from Behind the Net podcast. Mike, how's it going?
Good. Thanks for having me back, guys. It's always was a blast the last time, and I can't wait for this one to start.
We're happy to have you on the show. You're doing a Leafs podcast, or writing for the Leafs as well, or about the Leafs. Just a quick off the top here. What'd you think of the first 2 games there?
Well, the first one is hard to really comment on the game just because the John Tavares injury completely overshadows everything. And I think that affected the way the Leafs played and their mentality throughout the entire contest. The fact that you even got to the final buzzer, considering what they just saw, it's like pretty commendable. But the fact of the matter is Montreal was playing exceptional that game. Carey Price stood on his head, and the Leafs responded exceptionally well in game 2. And I think all the newcomers did exceptionally well as well. And hopefully, all they have to really do the rest of the way is just keep playing the way they did in game 2.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. We're definitely going to get into that as we go forward. But there's a few other things in the hockey world I did want to touch on. We did have, it was highlighted on one of the episodes of Hockey Night, but we did have quite a few coaches calling out the officiating in the playoffs, and specifically John Cooper. I remember him calling out the officials after,
which he does every third game, it feels like. I don't know if is that just me. I feel like he always calls out the officials, but not in a malicious way like the Rangers did.
He knows how to handle it. Everyone so far has handled it without getting a fine or any kind of discipline brought against them. There was John Cooper, there's Craig Berube. I'm surprised I didn't hear Peter Laviolette from the Capitals. He's usually has a lot to say.
He's usually really vocal, you're right.
Yeah, quite right. And then Colorado came out and obviously didn't like the Kadri suspension, but again, they said that the Department of Player Safety needs to have something. Someone's got to take a look at that because of the inconsistencies coming out of that department. So Mike, we'll just start with you. Your thoughts on the criticism of the officials and whether or not it's just a product of the time of year, or is it something that actually needs to be looked at?
I think it's a bit of both, but I also think that it's a long time coming because it's something we've always noticed for many, many years that the officiating seems to completely change once the playoffs begin. Yes, I know there's always been some problems with the officiating during the regular season, but those are amplified much more once the playoffs begin. And I think it's about time that there's coaches that really voice their complaints and ask for the NHL to be more clear and just wanting the rule book to be called fairly. So I don't know, like it's something that it's always made me want to be more interested in the game because now, like if the coaches are getting involved, it ups excitement, ups conversations, and obviously it just makes for an interesting product. But yes, the refs should be calling the play more fairly.
And Nick, I mean, you're a Colorado fan. I like to watch Colorado as well, but they came out and said there were some inconsistencies with the Kadri suspension, so they were also against the officiating and even higher up the Department of Player Safety. What are your thoughts on all that?
Two things, and we'll get into the Kadri a little bit more, but the suspension was right. I want to make that very clear before anyone jumps on me and says that I'm defending Colorado, and I'm not. I think that's a ridiculous comment. But their comments are also not wrong in the fact that there is so many inconsistencies within the Department of Player Safety, and it's getting to a point where it's affecting how players play the game. Because 3 weeks ago, Tom Wilson doesn't get suspended or fined for a sucker punch to a defenseless player because Buchnevich's hands were tied. He couldn't do anything. And Wilson's a repeat offender. Gets nothing. Kadri is a repeat offender and gets a bigger suspension than he's ever had. It's so inconsistent. It doesn't make sense to me. If you're going to be giving out fines and suspensions for previous history, then give out a fine or suspension for previous history on all of them, not just when you decide it's the right time to do it. It just seems so wrong. And I don't want to get on the player safety just because they have so many things that they're looking at. Like, they have to watch every single game, make sure there's nothing wrong in every single game. I get that. But there should be a consistent playbook that they're going by, Ryan, and they're just not. And it's frustrating for me personally. Yeah. I don't know.
We'll definitely get into that when we touch on the Kadri suspension, because you're on to something that a lot of people are mentioning, and that is inconsistencies in the department. So that's definitely something we'll get into when we get to the Kadri suspension. As far as the refereeing goes, I mean, I'm older than you guys, so I grew up a little bit in an era where it was kind of expected that the whistles get put away a bit when the playoffs start. So I'm a little more accepting of it when I see this happen in the playoffs, just because it's what I grew up with. Maybe because you guys are a younger generation, you see it differently and you're expecting or want it called the same way as it is in the regular season, Mike.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's just at the end of the day, just so it's a fair, balanced game. You don't want a game where one team is getting calls in their favor, and when you watch the replay of said penalties, it looks very egregious that there's almost nothing there. Like when for example, the game 2 between the Leafs and the Habs, a lot of the penalties that the Habs were taking were self-inflicted wounds. They were clear slashes, clear cross checks, all that stuff that they themselves are guilty of. Whereas in other moments, yeah, exactly, the coach's challenge. I don't need to even get into that.
Sorry, I had to.
And that proves my point. There should be penalties when the players does the infractions themselves. It shouldn't be super light ones where it's like maybe a light little touch of the glove, or like a super over exaggerated play where the player falls to the ice, like as in soccer where there's dives and all that stuff. So yeah, I would like to see penalties called more fairly. It just makes for a better product. And if there are a lot of penalties, it should be the player's fault and the player's fault themselves. And this should not be because the ref is trying to make it more balanced and fair.
And to build on that, like we are at a point where you want consistency. Everyone's calling for the robotic strike zone in MLB because they want consistency at the plate. Well, why if you have a rule is there gray area in the rule book? Like, it doesn't make sense to me. Oh, it's playoff hockey. It's a hockey game. It doesn't matter. If it's a penalty, it's a penalty. If it's not a penalty, it's not a penalty. I get that. I'm fine with that. But if you're going to call it one way for 95% of the year, why 5% of the year are we not calling it that way, Ryan? I get what you're saying. It used to be just accepted. But why was it accepted then? It doesn't make sense to me why it was accepted. It doesn't make sense to me why it's accepted now. And I guarantee if you go ask Kyle, he's going to say the same thing. I get frustrated because I truly do think that if the rule is in the rule book and it's written a specific way, it's supposed to be called that way. Why is there gray area? It doesn't. Why?
It stems from my generation and earlier generations.
Your damn generation.
Where it was, oh, you're going into a much more intense battle. This is a different situation. And so it was ignored that a rule is a rule. But as much as the general thinking nowadays is a rule is a rule, you have to follow the rule with the same conviction and same passion. Back in the day, it was considered, don't let all that pissy stuff be called in the playoffs because it's playoff time. So it's the same energy that everyone's bringing. It's just a different perspective now. So I think in time you will see these kind of calls made and the attitudes in the playoffs change. But
I just don't get it. If it's more aggressive in the playoffs, then you should be be policing it the same way you did in the regular season to try to take away from the dangerous hits that can occur in the playoffs because of the increased speed and the increased aggression. I just don't get why we're taking, like, how many hacks of Wayne Simmons did Shea Weber get in that third period before he finally got the fine? He didn't really even get a penalty, but he got the fine. Like, why did it take 4 hacks for the Department of Player Safety to be like, yeah, no, it was the fourth one. It was the fourth one that got him. You got him 3 times in the head.
I think that's a headbutting of 2 different ideals, of the old thinking and the new thinking. And that's
the old thinking's wrong in my head. So,
all right, Nick. Moving on to something else here going on, and I couldn't even tell you what exactly is going on, but the IIHF World Championships are happening right now. First off, in my book, why are they happening? We don't need this right now. People traveling overseas. I know they got a bubble situation going on over there. But we don't need this bunch of countries coming together to play the World Championships. And, a lot of players turn down the invitations just based on the fact that you're not going to have the same experience. You're going over to Latvia to sit in a bubble and compete for a World Championship that maybe means less than it did before. And that's not saying much. I used to be able to get involved a little bit in the World Championships, but Mike, where do you sit on this tournament? Because this year I'm thinking, who cares? I don't care.
In all honesty, I'm not really paying much attention to it. And I think in general, hockey fans don't really pay attention to the IIHF World Championship for a reason. And that's because of the fact that the Stanley Cup playoffs usually happen around the same time. It certainly doesn't help right now is usually the most watched time for the Stanley Cup playoffs, the first round. And obviously, if it was happening at a normal time, it would probably be like closer to the third, fourth round when interest is probably a little bit down, but maybe it's not so much where people are not even watching at all. So yeah, no, like I don't really see much of an appeal for this tournament. And if you're a Canadian hockey fan, you probably don't even care because the team is doing absolutely horrible. Like right now, they're losing 2-1 to Germany. It's just been a rough go for Team Canada. To your point, the fact that there's so many players not even playing just kind of lowers the quality of the competition.
Yeah. Absolutely. Go ahead, Nick.
No, I was just gonna build on that. I mean, like I get that it's not Team Canada like people want to see. Like, let's be honest, all the players that they want to see on Team Canada are playing in the playoffs most likely. So, just to be fair, but I actually love this tournament. Every year I watch it. I'm watching it right now. I've been watching it throughout the beginning of this tournament. I love this tournament because we get to see players that we don't normally see. And for me, that's the big draw. Like, I love watching the NHL players. I love watching the super skilled people that we get to see all the time. But what about the guys over in Europe that we don't get to see all the time? This is their opportunity to really shine on North American broadcast because all the games are broadcast here on TSN, in Canada at least. I love it. And this year, it's anybody's tournament. Latvia is 2-0-1. Germany's about to go 3-0. Switzerland is 2-0. Like, I love it. This is awesome. We're getting to see teams that don't normally succeed, and the Latvians in front of nobody, unfortunately, in their home rink are thriving. It's a really good opportunity to see players that we don't normally see, and that's why I love this tournament. Yes, is it the best hockey in the world? No, of course not. But it's still fun to watch for me. So I will defend this tournament until my last breath.
I think it's just too irrelevant right now. With a pandemic going on, you just have that extra layer of reason for people not to care. On top of that, you don't have the players going. I mean, did Canada send its best roster available? No, they didn't. They sent who they could get to this tournament. And maybe that's why in North America here, a lot of people don't care about it. In Europe, it's huge. They've finished their leagues so that the best players can be ready for the World Championship. So it matters to them. It's huge in Europe, but not so much here. And this year, I peek at it out of the corner of my eye, but this year it's just easy to ignore. The next thing I wanted to do is quickly go through, give our thoughts here on the first round series. We'll lay off on the Toronto, Montreal, and Colorado, St. Louis series because I feel like we're going to get into that with our main topics. But let's start in the north. Edmonton, Winnipeg. There's a chance for Winnipeg to sweep tonight. And if you're listening to the podcast version of this show, you already know what happens. Winnipeg has a chance to sweep tonight. I think Edmonton gave everything they had last night in game 3. It's kind of going to be in vain tonight. I think Winnipeg ends up sweeping tonight. Mike, your thoughts on this series?
I definitely agree with you that Winnipeg has a very good chance to sweep this series. I don't think anybody expected that the Winnipeg Jets would come out to a 3-0 series lead this quickly. And not only that, but in game 3, where the Oilers' big stars, McDavid and Draisaitl, finally woke up and got a bunch of points, they blew a 4-1 lead in the third period and let the Jets take a commanding lead with an overtime win. I believe was from Nick Ehlers. Yeah.
Nick Ehlers.
So, yeah, just a rough go for the Edmonton Oilers. It kind of just proves the point that they really need help for McDavid and Draisaitl. They just can't do it all by themselves. And as great as their regular season performance was, and don't get me wrong, seeing McDavid get over 100 points in a shortened season, Draisaitl having another spectacular season, and Mike Smith being arguably one of the best goalies in the league, they just do not have enough help. And also Tyson Barrie, of course, but that's just a former Leaf talk.
Hey, whoa. What happened to Tyson Barrie? What's wrong with Tyson Barrie's season? He actually had a good year.
Well, he's going to make a lot of money by re-signing with the Oilers at this rate.
Absolutely.
They have the number 1 power play, so it wouldn't be. It's a good idea for them to re-sign him if they could.
He also played well. Like, let's not take away from what Barrie did this year. He actually had a good year, not just on the power play. So,
yeah. Nick, does Winnipeg finish it off tonight?
I want to say no. I feel like Edmonton pulls out one. I feel like Mike Smith is going to stand on his head and they're going to win a 2-1 game or something like that. But I also have no faith in that happening at the same time. Like, I'm literally on the fence. Like, they're either going to win because Mike Smith and Connor McDavid go off, or the Jets are going to do what they've done for the first 3 games, and the Jets are going to win. Like, I really don't know where this is going. If I'm going with my gut says Jets win.
All right, let's move on over to the Central Division. Now, I said during our preview last week that I could not envision Nashville winning a single game. They've won 2 at home, and this series is even with Carolina. I thought Carolina was going to dominate, but Nashville did need 4 overtime periods to accumulate those 2 wins. Mike, your impressions of this series so far?
It's honestly been one of the best series to watch so far. I was hoping it would be the same for the Bruins and Capitals, but we'll get to them a little bit later for sure. But yeah, no, it's been entertaining. The goalies have been exceptional. Saros for Nashville taking his team to 2 overtime wins, and Nedeljkovic just playing out of his mind. And he's been the reason why Carolina's got a chance to win in all 4 games and only winning 2 of them. And he had a shutout as well. This has probably been one of the most entertaining series to watch, and I hope this goes to a 7th because this has been fun.
Yeah, but I couldn't even envision Nashville winning a game, so 7th game seems way far away for me. But obviously, these 2 teams can equal each other when they feel like it. Nick, have you seen any of this series, and what have your impressions been?
I've seen at least 1 game from every series. Most of them I've seen all but 1 game in each series. This has been fun. And give Nashville credit in the first 2 games. I know they lost 5-2 and 3-0, but they weren't blown out in those games, in my opinion. Like, I don't feel like they were dominated to those scored lines. I think a couple empty netters didn't help. And they showed that in front of a crowd, in their own home, that they can dominate, or they can play really, really good hockey. I'm not going to say they dominate because they didn't dominate. It went to double overtime. But they put up 9 goals in 2 games. They have 11 goals in 4 games in the series. That's really good. That's what you want. You would prefer not to have as many goals against as they do. But 11 goals in 4 games is very, very good hockey. They just need to continue it and get 1 in Carolina if they're going to upset this Carolina team, which I still don't see it happening. But they've shown that they can play with them.
You want to talk about goals against? Let's look at the other Central Series. The what did I hear Craig Button call it? Gator Gateway Series, I think he called it. The Panthers and Lightning. This one, if you're down, you cannot count out that team. Like, Florida's down 3-1 in the series right now. I can still envision this going to 7 games. You have no clue what's going to happen when these 2 teams get out on the ice. It's complete chaos. It's beautiful hockey. It's almost like 80s hockey because there's a ton of scoring, and all you need your goalie to do is make the save at the right time. They may allow 4 or 5, but it's when it's in that third period, just make the save. This has been an incredible series to watch. No one's ever out of it until the horn goes at the end of the game. Mike, just are you enjoying this series as much as we are?
I am. I'm absolutely enjoying this series, and it's just crazy to me that this is only the first time the Lightning and the Panthers have faced each other in the playoffs. But then you remember their histories, and then it kind of makes sense. But it's been well worth the wait. It's super entertaining, like you said, physical. It's been mean spirited. It's personal. I love it. I just can't get enough of this series. And yeah, you're right. I love to the series to go the distance. I love to see how many goalies the Florida Panthers use because they might even use Spencer Knight tonight. And they're going to be having 75% of their fans in the building for Game 5. So that should be even more crazier. And who knows how loud that building is going to be if the Florida Panthers score.
Oh my goodness. I'm so jealous just the situation where the American teams can have some fans. And that's where the Toronto Montreal series kind of takes a hit. No fans in the building. Nick, the Florida series, what are you thinking?
You guys have nailed it on the head. I don't have to add anything to what you or Mike have said. It's been awesome, and it's kind of exactly what you and me talked about, Ryan. It was going to be a fun series. We're obviously big on the Florida guys just because of our Barks and Hubie watch that we've done all year. But it's still been so much fun. Kucherov, the one thing we said going into the series is we don't know how Kucherov's going to respond to being off for an entire year if he's going to be able to get up to speed right away. Well, newsflash, he got up to speed right away.
Oh, I beg to differ on Nick. I beg to differ on that. I believe he has 2 or 3 even strength points. The rest has been on the power play where it's not as physical. You do have to skate and grind.
Yeah, but he still has looked good in at 5-on-5. He doesn't look out of the play. It's not like he's trailing behind. It's not like he's way out of position. He's up to speed. That was my biggest concern would he be able to be up to speed to the point where they could put him out for his normal shift? Well, he's proven that he's up to speed. He can go out for his normal shift. He's not out of place, which is a huge thing for the Lightning because you want your best players on the ice. And, well, he's your best player right now. He needs to be on the ice. So, because of that, I love this series. I think it has the potential to go a lot longer than 5 games, which it could go tonight, obviously. I hope it goes to 6 or 7 just because I want more of this. I just want more of the intensity that this series has brought.
All right, moving along to the East, the Mass Mutual East. We have Boston taking out Washington in 5 games. I'm not surprised who won this series. I'm surprised at how quickly it went. Boston winning games 2 through 5. So if you take out game 1, it's sort of a sweep there. And I thought after Washington lost in game 3 in overtime with the miscue behind the net, that they just fell apart. Mike?
Absolutely. There seems to be some disconnect in the locker room in Washington. It certainly doesn't help that Alex Ovechkin's contract is set to expire at the end of the season. Now, I certainly believe that he's going to be back in Washington for next season, but there's still that possibility that he could potentially be either somewhere else in NHL or back home in Russia. And I think that that's been clouding over this team throughout the playoffs. And besides that game 1, I just think it just affected everything. And when you have that sort of disconnect for a team that, yes, did win a Stanley Cup a couple of years ago and still has that mentality they can still win, go all the way, it just kind of hurts your chances. And that's what happened this year. Now, obviously, it would have been great to see the series go to 7th game because I thought it could have done that. But Boston is still very good, even though the record wasn't as good as in seasons past.
I thought they really picked it up in the last 15, 20 games of the season, and they look like the old Boston Bruins. I mentioned that before, Nick.
Yeah, you did, and it's disappointing to see Washington not show up for this series because we thought this was going to be a really, really fun series like the Florida-Tampa one. They just didn't show up, and I thought Samsonov, honestly, and Anderson, to be fair, didn't play that bad. They were hung out to dry a lot. Obviously, Samsonov's error in the OT cost them the game. But outside of that, he really didn't play that bad. And it's kind of disappointing because Ovechkin is on the last year of his contract. So where does he go? Me and Mike were talking about this last night, ironically. And I think he stays. I think this is the only place that he will play in the NHL. But does he stay in the NHL? Does he go back home? Like, is he done in the NHL? I don't think so. So I think he resigns. But there's so many question marks now. And this team is not getting any younger. This is not a young team to begin with, and now they're not getting any younger. So there's some huge question marks going into next season and how they're going to reposition or regroup to try to make another run if Ovechkin does come back. And if he doesn't, Do they tear down? Do they rebuild and restart? Because you just lost your talisman. You lost your centerpiece of this organization. So where do they go from here? I don't know yet, and we're gonna have to find out.
My spidey senses are going off. There seems to be something weird there. I would expect Ovechkin to come back, but there's just something not sitting right with me that he may not be back with the Washington Capitals next year at this point, if it's not already done, but we'll see there. The other series in the East, to me, has 7 games written all over it. Pittsburgh and the Islanders is just attack and counterattack in this series. One team wins, the other team is able to come back and even the series. Mike, your thoughts on this Islanders Penguins series that seems to be headed the distance?
Well, first off, I'm glad this series did not end in 4 games because that was how the last time these two teams faced off went. So I'm grateful for that. But yeah, no, this has been absolutely entertaining. Both teams seem to be evenly matched. The high flying offense of the Penguins is still going strong. Jeff Carter's been an exceptional add for their team, and the Islanders have always had that defensive mindset, and they're still playing that to a T in this series. It's been great to watch these two types of mentalities clashing against one another. And yeah, like I'm very curious to see how this series goes. And Game 5 tonight should be a very pivotal one because whoever wins this game has big control of this series.
I love Game 5s just because when it's tied 2-2 going into a Game 5, the series can't end, but it's such a pivotal game, and one team can take such a stranglehold on it and leave themselves a little runway, while the other team for the next 2 games is going to have to play for their entire season. Nick, Islanders or Pittsburgh, what do you see happening in these next possible 3 games?
I don't know, because the first 4 confused me, honestly. I thought Pittsburgh was the better team, and I said it from the beginning. I thought the Islanders were going to win Game 3 in front of their fans, Game 5 to extend the series, and then losing 6 games. Well, they could still lose in 6 games, but they did not do it the way I thought they were going to do it. And Game 4 taught me that don't expect the Islanders not to score, because they put up 4. They've put up 4 goals in 3 games this series, Ryan. Did we expect that? No.
No,
That's not Islander hockey. What is this?
Have they burnt their wick, so to speak? Have they shown their hand? Is that their game where they got all of their goal scoring out of their system?
I don't even know. I just think that they're playing the right game right now, and it's nice to see. And again, it's another series that I want to see more of, just because I don't know what to expect from it. Like, I want to see more of the series because I want to see how all the options that could play out.
And the last one we're going to get to in the West, we'll save the Colorado-St. Louis series for when we talk about Kadri. But the last series we'll get to in the West, Vegas, Minnesota. Minnesota can just spring up on you, have a not terribly productive game, but a really good defensive game. And all of a sudden the series could be 3-2 by tomorrow night. So, Mike, does it end tonight, or does Minnesota pull a Minnesota, and we're talking about a Game 6?
Well, if Minnesota is going to make this a series and force a Game 6, they really need to get some offense going. They've been completely shut out since Game 1. It's just been completely dominated by Vegas's defense. Kirill Kaprizov, who's been eccentric this year, like absolutely phenomenal rookie season, has been dead silent. He's only had 1 point through the first 4 games, and this is the time where he needs to step up his game if he wants to give Minnesota a chance. Because if he doesn't, and the rest of the Minnesota's players just can't even pull up their weight, which has been a big problem for this series, Vegas is going to be playing Colorado in the second round.
I can't wait for that. I'm looking forward to that. I'm almost banking on it because that's my heavyweight matchup. Nick, you're kind of in the same boat, but I know you want to see how this Vegas-Minnesota series plays out.
I thought Minnesota was going to put up more of a fight defensively. I think that's the biggest surprise I'm taking away so far, is that Vegas has truly dominated the last 3 games. I know Minnesota only has 4 goals in 4 games. Like, that's not good enough. You need to put up more points if you want to compete in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Whereas Vegas had 4 goals last game. There's a difference right there. Minnesota had 4 goals in the first 4 games of the series. Vegas had 4 goals in the last game of the series. Like, you need to score to compete. And you mentioned Kaprizov, Mike, and the fact that he was so heavily relied upon in the regular season played into the fact that he's not putting up points now, because Vegas is like, oh, he's the only one we have to worry about? Okay, we're going to worry about him and him alone. And they've done it. It's not hard when you have a game plan. Hey, stop him.
Vegas has dismantled Minnesota. Like you and I have talked about it all year, Nick, where Minnesota was able to put up wins. Like they would get blown out or lose big, but then they were able to keep things tight and win 3 or 4. And just when it's a repeated effort against Vegas, Vegas seems to have been able to dismantle them here in this.
Well, it doesn't help when Joel Eriksson Ek is your leading point getter with 2.
Yeah, and one of them was an overtime goal. So,
2.
If you want to look at that, not even in regulation. Nick, before we get into our main topics, it's your time to shine. Barks and Hubie watch. This is what we've been looking forward to. Hopefully it doesn't end tonight. We've been tracking these guys all season. So how did they do so far in the first 4 games against the Tampa Bay Lightning?
Well, Ryan, they're still over a point a game. Their point a game pace is still on pace. And Sam Bennett actually joined them. He's at a point a game as well. Just throwing that out there. We talked about new scenery. Well, it's worked out for Sam Bennett. Let's focus on our guys. Barkov, 1 goal, 4 assists in 4 games. He was a -6, but I think we're used to that at this point. So throw that out the window. He took 17 shots, though. Like, that's not Barkov's game. 17 shots is a lot of shots through 4 games. But 21-34 of ice time. Like, this is exactly what we expect from a player of his caliber. 3 points on the power play, 2 even strength points. Like, Barkov was phenomenal this week. And then Jonathan Huberdeau said, I see your 5 points, and I raise you with 6 assists and 2 goals myself, leading the team with 8 points in 4 games. He's looked phenomenal. He's stepped up, and it's just great to see these two playing in the playoffs. How much longer we're going to see them, I don't know.
It's a roll of the dice, Nick. Like, legitimately, it could be done tonight if Tampa Bay wins, obviously. You can see that happening.
Yeah.
And then you could see Florida rattling off the next 2, and we have an incredible 7th game. So
it'll come down to goaltending, in my opinion, because Bob was not very good in the game that he started.
I hope Spencer Knight starts tonight and goes on some sort of 1993 Felix Potvin type run here. That would be fantastic. Let's see it happen. So we got to get into the John Tavares injury. So let's do that right now. All right, game 1, Leafs and Habs. And John Tavares gets hit down to the ice, and then the injury occurs when Corey Perry is trying to... And he ends up kneeing or walking into Tavares' head. I don't think anyone could say that this one was on purpose. I know Corey Perry's reputation, but as soon as it wasn't the initial injury, because you didn't see it on the hard cam, but it was when Tavares tried to get up and he wasn't all there. So you have the trainer bracing his neck and he tries to get up. He's on his knees, and then you just see his eyes roll and he falls back. And I'm pretty cold towards injuries. Usually I'm like, okay, come on. Are you get up, let's go. Let's move along. This was actually the first ever injury that really struck me. Down in my gut, nothing felt good about it. And then of course he's stretchered off, game delayed for about 7 or 8 minutes. Just a horrible scene and hard to even focus on the intensity of the playoffs after that. Mike, how shook were you by this injury?
I was absolutely devastated. It was very hard to put into words how upsetting it was to watch that. And when he collapsed on the trainer's arm, it just gutted me. It was absolutely tough to watch. And all the support that they were giving to Tavares afterwards was just shows how much the Leaf fan base cares and appreciates what the captain has done for the team. So to see him go down like that and just all the players just looking so distraught and not really focus on the game itself. It's like, how can you even enjoy the rest of the game or even focus on it when you saw that happen? So like I was saying before, it's commendable they were able to finish that game and even keep it as close as they did. The fact that they only lost by 1 goal in a game where they saw that, it's impressive. And we saw like how well they responded in game 2. And who knows when Tavares comes back? I don't think he'll be back this season, in my opinion. But they're definitely going to use him as motivation to try and close one out and win their first playoff series in a long time.
Yeah, and as the captain, he's happy to use himself as motivation. Judging by the reporters and what they put out there on Twitter, it sounds like he's still involved in the team text chat, group chat, whatever you want to call it, and he's there to rally the troops. And so he's happy to be a part of that. Based on game two, like you mentioned, Mike, it seems that the Leafs are able to move on. I mean, you can't even really fault them for losing game one. As a fan, I'm in a fog trying to get involved in game one after the injury. They're the players on the ice. Some of them even spoke to Tavares while the incident is going on. I don't even know how you reset and refocus and try and win that game. So it'll be interesting to see what the Leafs can do now that the series is in Montreal. And Nick, is Toronto going to be able to steamroll Montreal, or was that game one legitimately a good Montreal effort and they can make a series out of this?
I think Montreal, this is going to sound really weird. They got lucky that Toronto was shocked in game one. And that's a horrible thing to say. And I need you to understand, like, they got lucky because Toronto was shocked. They didn't get lucky because of the Tavares injury. Like, that would be an awful thing to say. And that's
yeah,
not
they
what I'm saying.
benefited from the circumstances.
Right?
Yeah.
And they played the perfect response game to that, is that they didn't try to go out of their way to put pressure on. They allowed Toronto to kind of like lazily play through the rest of the game, which I don't blame Toronto for playing that way, because honestly, I wouldn't have been able to play. Like, I wouldn't have. There's no way I would have been able to play that game as a teammate of John Tavares, as just a human being. I would not have been able to play that game. And I told you, Ryan, while the game was going on, I'm like, if the Leafs lose this game, I don't blame them. Like, you just watched one of your best friends, your captain, your leader, on the ice, like, lost. That is an awful feeling.
Yeah.
The only thing I can ever compare it to is I saw a guy break both of his legs in a soccer match, and you could hear the snap from the bench, the far bench from where he broke them. It was sickening. Our game was canceled. That's the difference. These guys had to play.
Yeah, and when there's millions of dollars on the line, as there is in an NHL game, as far as advertisers and television goes, you can't cancel the game. But yeah, it just felt like, what was the point on going on? You just had to play it because
it's the playoffs.
It's the playoffs. You just have to keep going, and everyone knows the risks involved. But it's like, why are we doing this? And game one played out as it did. Montreal took advantage of the circumstances. Right after the injury, Foligno fought Perry, and there's definitely two distinct camps on this. And I'm moving from one camp to the other. Originally, as it happened, you and I were texting, Nick, didn't need to happen. Now, as time has gone by, and I have the benefit of 2020 hindsight, I get why it happened. It's still a bit of a silly fight, but it was done, and there's no chat about, hey, does anyone on the Leafs have to go out and get retribution, or do you think anyone on the Leafs has to go deal with this issue? So what Foligno did in his mind was, a bit primitive, a bit barbaric, like, my guy's hurt, I'm going to hurt you in a fight. But at the same time, it just stops all the chatter around the incident, and the series can move on. So in that regard, I'm kind of for the fight, but just the idea of it and fighting in hockey in general, I'm against. Mike, where do you sit on that fight afterwards?
I'm certainly fine with that fight happening. And my thinking is that he was trying to get his team to focus back on the game to the best of their abilities. Because obviously, like you said, like, how can you really focus back on a playoff game, let alone a game in itself, when you see your captain go down like that? So that was my thinking. One is to try and just sell a score and not cause any further disturbance, because if that fight does not happen, who knows how much more aggressive the Leafs would be. They'd probably be feeling on a lot of emotions. They'd probably want to go after Perry, maybe go even more dangerous than what happened. And there could be a suspension, and that'd be much worse than losing just your captain. Not only would that happen, then you'd also lose a player for a suspension. So I'm fine with it in that regard. And I'm also fine with it as an attempt to try and get his team back on focus on the game. Obviously, it did not work because the Leafs ended up losing 2-1. But you got to respect him for wanting to try, at least. That's my thing on it.
Nick, where do you sit on the fight?
I'm still torn. I understand what you guys are saying, and I don't think I would have as much of a problem with it if it wasn't the face-off that followed. Right? To be honest, Perry should not have been on the ice for that face-off. Not a chance. It should have been a different line. They should have, right? Because you knew it was coming. And I think after thinking about it and hearing what they said at the intermission, that the players don't have the benefit of replay to see that it was a complete accident. So they see their captain down, they see Perry skating away. Okay, well, we got to get him back, right? Like that's just the general rule of thumb in hockey. No matter how stupid that is, it's the general rule of thumb in hockey. So I understand the people who say, okay, it had to be done, like whatever. I just don't think it needed to happen immediately at the next faceoff. Like I just don't think Perry should have been on the ice. I think he should have been sat until another faceoff, not the very first one, but another faceoff by the Canadians, unless there was like a long no whistle thing, and just let it happen at that faceoff because it takes away from how serious that incident was. I think immediately, and it's like, okay, well now they got their chunk of flesh, and that I think gets me, and that's where I still am not happy with it.
I think maybe Perry, I didn't see any exchange, but maybe Perry thought, I need to be out there. Or someone said, Perry, you got to answer for this. Or at the same time, Montreal can't let an injury or how the Toronto Maple Leafs feel dictate what they think they need to do to be successful. So there's also, I see where you're coming from, Nick. That's one way to look at it. But there's all sorts of reasons why he also should have been out there for the puck drop. So definitely, like I mentioned, two camps on the fight, 4 against. You don't hear anyone who's right in the middle of that. But after the fight, after the injury, after game 1, where the Leafs, I don't even think they were really into it. They were able to regroup and move forward. So how do they move forward in this series? And does this become a big rallying cry? For instance, I saw people on Twitter trying to get win for JT trending. I didn't really see it get trending. So is this something that the Leafs are going to keep internal? Or is it going to become a big rallying cry going forward, Mike?
I definitely think it feels like this is going to be a rallying cry for the team. There's a video that the Leafs released just a few hours ago on their Twitter where Keefe was saying that this one was for the captain, where this one, if he was here, we'd give him the game puck. So I think that inside the locker room, they're going to use that as a rallying point or just as something to really focus on. Like, we're going to try and do our best to win it for JT. And if he can possibly come back in this series, we'll make sure that he's able to play again, because right now, like I was saying, it looks like he's not coming back for this season. So yeah, like trying to do one for your captain with one of your best players out, it's a rallying point, I think, at least for a player and a team.
Nick, do the Leafs rally around Tavares, or is this just a bit of a roadblock that you got to get through, as every team has to do that wants to be successful in the playoffs?
Oh, they absolutely rally around him. It's just how big of a loss is the real question to me. Like, John Tavares is a point per game player across his career. Do you know how hard it is to be a point per game player in the NHL? Like, you're losing a huge part of this team. And do I think the Montreal Canadiens are going to be the team that trips them up? Maybe not. But Winnipeg certainly looks like they might be able to. They're shutting down 2 top players right now in Edmonton on I will say, a worse overall team than the Leafs. But if you don't have to focus on 2 lines, like you had to focus before on these 2 lines, yeah, it might be a little easier for the Leafs to trip up. So they need to rally, they need to come together, and they need to use John Tavares' leadership off the ice to their advantage. It's unfortunate you don't have him on the ice, but use his off the ice leadership to your advantage now, because you have that guy. You have a guy who is a true leader. Now being able to talk to the guys in between games, give them a little bit of a pep talk and say, like, listen, keep going, keep fighting. You guys got this. I believe in you. Let's just make this happen. So we'll see what happens.
All on this puts all the pressure for me on William Nylander. Like, the number 1 line is a clear number 1 line now, and teams like Montreal, and if there's a second round opponent, can focus on the Matthews line. So guess who's going to benefit from that? It's William Nylander. And I am not in the Nylander camp. I'm not a Nylander fan, but through 2 games of this series, I like the intensity that he's bringing. I like his effort level out there. I think you're maximizing a Nylander effort level at the moment. It is what it is, but I think you're getting the most out of him. And this guy could put up big numbers if he really wants to here in the playoffs.
He could.
Nylander's been playing exceptional in these playoffs so far. You're definitely right there, and this would be a great breakout performance for him if he can keep this up.
Agreed.
Perfect. All right. So, and we do have to say, I mean, obviously, I think everyone in the hockey world wants to see John Tavares back in some manner, whenever that is. When you hop into the Twitter cesspool, you're going to find the dirt. And so there's way too many people on Twitter responding to John Tavares tweets about, well, when is he coming back? Is he going to be ready for this series? It's like, not even in consideration right now. If he plays again in the playoffs, that's a bonus. It's just, let's get John Tavares back to regular life and a healthy life, and then talk about hockey. So, pardon me, we will be coming right back. We are going to have to get into the Colorado Avalanche and the Nazem Kadri hit, suspended for 8 games. So we will do that when we come right back after this.
Hey guys, it's producer Jake here from Betting House, the Garage Door Sports Network's ultimate degenerate gambling podcast. Catch our episodes weekly on Apple, Spotify, and Google as we bring you banter, laughter, and of course picks for all sorts of games throughout the week. Give us a follow on our socials at Betting House Pod, where you can catch all our bets each week, as well as some bonus content. Remember to always gamble responsibly. Let's get rich.
Welcome back. 20 Minutes on Ice. Ryan Hazlitt, Nick McVicker, and of course with us we have from Behind the Net podcast, Mike Mazzei. We got to get into the Nazem Kadri suspension, 8-game suspension for his high hit on Justin Falk. As soon as I saw the hit, I was like, Kadri, what are you doing? Nick, I think we texted, and I mentioned that Kadri, the way he plays in the playoffs without control, is going to end up costing him millions of dollars in a contract, or it may end up costing him a spot in the league. It was just a ridiculous hit. He needed to slow up. It just, all angles of the hit look like he's trying to drive upwards. I don't see any effort to make contact with Falk's shoulder or aim for the chest or anything like that. It was just an egregious hit. And I just shook my head and said, oh, Kadri again. Mike, what did you think when you saw this?
Your exact thoughts there. Nazem, why are you doing this? I can't believe we're even having this discussion again, that Kadri did something so egregious enough that suspended. And just, I'd hope that he'd use that trade as a wake-up call to maybe refocus his play towards just becoming a good player and trying to prove the Leafs wrong by trading him away to Colorado. And while he did do that last season, and for the most part this season, again, he proved that he still hasn't fully moved past that mentality. And like, yes, there's nothing wrong with the kind of player that Kadri is. He plays with a lot of intensity. He plays a physical game, a two-way game that's excellent. And you love to have players like that in your team. But the fact that there's a possibility that he could throw a dangerous hit at any point and it could cost your team a key player for a playoff round, it's just hard to look past that. Now, obviously, Colorado is a much better built team than the Leafs, so they were able to overcome that. But who's to say that if Kadri does that again and is against a much better team like the Vegas Golden Knights in the next round, they might have a tougher time because they're missing one of their top 6 centers.
They're going to need the depth if they're going to play Vegas in the second round, and they won't have that for possibly the entire series.
For the first 6 games.
Yeah. So, Nick, you're a Leafs fan. You're a Colorado fan. So You've been a Kadri fan for that entire time.
I have a Kadri Stadium Series jersey for the Leafs.
Okay, so there you go. So what did you think when you saw the Kadri hit?
He just played himself out of being on a top team moving forward.
He really did cost himself. Like, I'm not even really thinking about, oh man, you've hurt your own team, which he has done. I'm thinking you've hurt your own self by doing this.
Like, it is so frustrating because Mike mentioned it. It looked like he had turned the corner last year in the playoffs for Colorado. Like, he didn't do anything dumb. He stayed in the whole time. Colorado made a pretty deep run despite the fact that half their players were hurt and we were playing Michael Hutchison in a playoff game. It blows my mind that he went out and decided, this is what I'm going to do for this game. Like, there is no intent to hit the shoulder, and it was clear. Like, he could have easily hit Falk's shoulder, blown him up. It would have been a clean hit. I would hope that Falk would be okay, because I hate seeing any injury. but it would have been a clean hit, and no one would be talking about it except for maybe the fact, it might have been the biggest hit of the playoffs. Like, if he hits him in the shoulder and absolutely blows him up like he did with the headshot, we're talking it being a good hit. But he decided, no, I need to be talked about in a different way. And it cost him, and it's awful because he has skill. This is a skilled player. This isn't a fourth-line scrub that we're talking about here. This is a guy who is potentially a second-line center, third-line center on a really good team. And now he just played his way out of being on a top team because you can't rely on him in the playoffs. This is his third playoff suspension, I believe, if I'm correct.
And 6th overall, I believe.
6th overall. Like, that is unacceptable. You can't be doing that on a top team. Tom Wilson gets away with it because he's been with Washington for so long, right? But if Tom Wilson tried to get a contract on another team that was a top team and they were worried about that suspension history, I guarantee it's not the same thing. But they put up similar points. So if Kadri now goes on the open market and doesn't re-sign in Colorado, which I don't know if he will after this, he's not going to be able to play for a Vegas or a Toronto or, I'm trying to think of really top teams right now, Tampa. Like, those guys won't even take a sniff at him because he's just cost the team in the playoffs. It's very, very disappointing.
I think any team will get the idea that, we can change this guy. Let our people get our mitts on him, and we can change him. So
and we got a great comment from Matt in the comment section saying Seattle would be the new spot for him. It might be. It honestly might be.
Yeah, I can see. Is he a UFA at this point?
Can't remember. I think he has another year.
Yeah, it would be good to know because then they'll just not sign him and they won't have to protect him or expose him until after the fact.
He's got another year and a no movement clause or a modified no trade clause.
Okay, so I think they have to protect him then.
Yeah, they do. But Colorado only has 4 no movement clause, 5 if you include Dubnyk. But Dubnyk's a UFA. So they only have 4 no movement clauses on their team, and 3 of them are the only one who's doesn't have one that's of the top guys is Mikko Rantanen. So
I would if I'm the Avs, I'm approaching Kadri, and especially if they can succeed without him here in the playoffs, I'm approaching Kadri and saying, hey, can you waive that no move? We'd like to expose you.
Forget that. Let Seattle pick somebody and then say, hey, Seattle, we'll trade you.
You want Kadri and we get our guy back?
Well, yeah, if they let's say they take I need a player who's signed. Yeah, let's say they take Comfer or Nichushkin. Like, hey, you want Kadri? He can be your number 1 center.
And I don't know if Kadri has any value, like you mentioned, Nick.
He does, though, because he's a good player, and Seattle's not a team that's worried about playoff. Because, honestly, I think his last 3 suspensions are playoff suspensions. So you're looking at it, it's like, okay, well, he's figured out how to play clean in the regular season. So for a team that like Seattle, who doesn't really know what to expect going into next year, maybe they take a flyer on a Kadri because he has more points than a Nichushkin or a JT Compher, right? And just say, hey, we'll give it a whirl. It's a better player. Sure, why not?
The punishment was 8-game suspension. Kadri's going to appeal it. It may take 8 games to appeal it. I think we've seen this appeals process before from Tom Wilson, I believe, appealed one of his suspensions, but the process took the same amount of time as the games did. So he just got money back in the end. So Kadri may not gain any games back, but he is going to appeal the 8-game suspension. Mike, when you heard the punishment and based on recent events, what were your thoughts there?
Well, I definitely knew that he was going to get a pretty lengthy suspension. My initial guess was he was going to get a 5-game for that hit. I did not expect an 8-game suspension. So that's something that really caught me off guard in some sense. But then when you think about it, it was a pretty reckless hit. It was very avoidable. And the fact that he has a history just goes to show that suspension was justifiable. Now, obviously, it can be probably cut down to maybe 4 games if the appeal goes exceptionally well, which who even knows at this point, just based on the fact that it takes forever for appeals to go through. So, yeah, no, the suspension length was perfectly fine. Let's just hope that he doesn't do this again, because if he does another hit similar to this one, it's going to be even longer.
There's no reason to believe with Kadri's behavior that he won't do it again. I mean, if you took a quick poll and said, will Kadri do this again? How can you say he won't do it again at this point, just based on recent behavior? You can only hope that he won't do it again. Nick, 8 games for your Colorado guy. What'd you think when you heard the 8 games based on? I mean, we'll get into Wilson because you got to compare this to Wilson because the NHL cited repeat offender in the Kadri case and cited nothing in the Wilson case. So 8 games for Kadri. What was your reaction?
It was right. Like it should have been 8 games, and we said that I don't think the Department of Player Safety got it right for Wilson. It should have been a suspension because of his history. So it doesn't really change my opinion of the Wilson thing because I thought it was wrong to begin with. Like it's not like it changes that because they're still wrong. It hasn't changed. The Kadri one, 8 games is what he should be suspended. It was direct contact to the head. It's the 3rd time he's been suspended in the playoffs. It's his 6th time being suspended overall. He's not learning. So guess what? You're done for a while. Like go sit down, think about what you've done, try to be better. Is there any chance that he will be better? Of course there's a chance. Do I think it's going to happen? No. No, I do not. And I really, really wish, because he is a good player. And Matt, in our comments, is making very good points that Seattle needs good players, so they probably try to take a flyer on him. Absolutely. Because I watched him in London. I watched him in Toronto. I've now watched him in Colorado. He's a good player. He just doesn't have his head always screwed on right. And it's very, very disappointing. Very disappointing.
Now, we brought up Tom Wilson several times, and I mentioned that you cannot take the two apart. They're connected because the league cited a repeat offender for Kadri and never even mentioned that in the Wilson situation. So, and both were egregious, terrible lapses in judgment. So, how do you perceive that Tom Wilson fine? It wasn't even a suspension. At this point now, seeing Kadri get 8 games in the playoffs, and if you're doing the unspoken math, you would have to think that's 16 regular season games. So how does Wilson only get fined $5,000, Mike?
It just further goes to show that they really dropped the ball on Tom Wilson's fine. I think it just really needs to show that there needs to be some more consistency in how the Department of Player Safety operates and hands out fines and suspensions. Just the fact that Tom Wilson's able to pretty much get away with things and only have to take a slap on the wrist before he can continue on his rampage, it's very disappointing. And who's to say that Tom Wilson could throw a very dangerous hit that could almost like put a player's life in serious risk? Will that be the point when they finally change their ways and give Tom Wilson the suspension that he should have gotten a long time ago? I don't even know at this point, because they just been clearly showing that they only are going to focus on particular players, and they're not going to show that same attention towards the ones that really should be paying attention to. And Tom Wilson's one of them. And it's just very disappointing to me that we're at this point now where we still haven't Tom Wilson still hasn't gotten a suspension to the likes of Rafi Torres, where he got suspended for half the season.
Yeah, and even if you go further back, Wilson earlier this year against Brandon Carlo of the Bruins. I mean, it was a crush against the boards, which I thought deserved maybe a boarding penalty, but all of a sudden, I think Wilson got hit with 7 games at that point, and at that point they cited repeat offenders. So based on, I'll call these inconsistencies, and we should do a quick poll here amongst the three of us, and of course everybody who's watching on Twitch, you can get involved in the chat on this one. The Rangers came out, and I applauded them for having the balls to say, we don't believe that George Parros is capable of properly executing his position of head of Department of Player Safety. So do you stand with the Rangers at this point, or do you say no, that's not fair? We'll go to you, Nick, first. Does the Department of Player Safety need a rebuild?
Yes. Is George Parros the problem? No. Because it's not just George Parros, it's the whole department that needs to be shaken up. Do I think George Parros can still do the job? Absolutely. I think he's put in a very crappy situation, and he's trying to deal with it the best he can, because there are certain, I want to say, strings being pulled behind the scenes that we aren't aware of. He's the face of Department of Player Safety. He doesn't make all the decisions. Does he have a say in most of the decisions? Absolutely. I'm not denying that fact. But I still think he can be the face of the Department of Player Safety if everything in the back room is fixed, because it's really messed up behind him. He's just taking a lot of the brunt.
Mike, where do you sit on this?
I definitely agree that the Department of Player Safety needs a complete overhaul. I don't know if that means changing George Peros for somebody else, but there definitely needs to be some different ideology towards how they view plays, how they give out suspensions, how they give out fines, all that stuff. Because if there is no consistency right now, who's to say that it'll get much worse as the playoffs go along and something even worse happens than what happened with Nazem Kadri? So yeah, in this offseason, the priority needs to be on changing the way the Department of Player Safety operates and hopefully finding a more consistent message and consistent way of handing out disciplinary actions.
I think you need new voices in the DOPS. So it's time for a change in that regard. I think you need people in the game, but not former players. From everything I've seen, and this is just on television and Twitter, former players have a different idea of what is acceptable within the game and what is supposed to happen versus the outside world. But the outside world has just as much effect on your on the league's finances as do the players playing the game. So I think you need a combination, maybe a committee here with outside influences and in the game influences. And I think these people need to stop taking soliciting phone calls from the teams arguing on their behalf. You can have a hearing with a player if it's so deemed, but I don't think the GM should be allowed to call up the Department of Player Safety and start getting in their ear and getting mad. How can you give this guy 8 games? This is ridiculous. And here, let me cite all these other things. I think that needs to stop because that's affecting things too much. Nick,
Ryan, hold on, Ryan. Before we move on, does that mean George Peros needs to lose his job, in your opinion? I'm asking because me and Mike, I think, are on the same page. Is that I don't think George Peros is the reason that the Department of Player Safety is inconsistent. There's a lot of backroom issues that seem to be inconsistent. So does George Peros have to lose his job, or can he still be the face of while everything is being changed?
I think he does need to move on because I would suggest that new voices need to be heard in that situation. So
okay.
And he's the head of player safety. I know you keep mentioning there's backroom, there's other voices involved. When you take on the position of head of something, you're taking it on understanding that when, praise or criticism comes around, it's going to fall on you.
Absolutely. I'm not denying that.
Yeah. So I think he does need to move on just based on the fact that we need new voices in that situation. That's my opinion.
Okay.
Subject. So, all right, that was excellent talk there on the Kadri suspension. We went in depth on the Tavares injury. So when we come back from break, we will be getting into our usual segments: Players of the Week, 3 hot, 3 not, and of course, we will fire up the randomizer. That is all when we come back on 20 Minutes on Ice. Yes. We're back. 20 Minutes on Ice. Ryan Haslett, Nick McVicker, and of course, we're joined from Behind the Net podcast, Mike Mazzei. It is time to get into our Players of the Week.
My favorite part of every episode.
That's your favorite tune of music. The show. All right, let's start off with our Rookies of the Week. Mike, you're our special guest here, so why don't you lead us off with your Rookie of the Week for the week of May 17th to the 23rd?
This was kind of a tough one for me, but I ended up deciding on Alex Nedeljkovic. He did exceptionally well for the Hurricanes so far, already has a playoff shutout and a playoff win, and he took his team to 2 double overtimes, to be more exact. He's been the reason why the Hurricanes not only are in this series, but the fact that they were able to just stay in a lot of games. So that's my easy choice for Rookie of the Week.
I totally forgot he was a rookie because he plays like a vet. He has great poise. He doesn't look scared or lost in that net. So excellent choice.
It looks like he's been in Carolina's net for like 6 years. Like,
awesome stuff there. All right, Nick. You know what? I'll go next. I'll take Florida's Ryan Lomberg. And although he only had one goal, he's a fourth liner. And every time I turn on that series, he is out there trying to take every single Tampa Bay Lightning player off their game. He's been very effective. He's been very noticeable. And then, of course, he had that great breakout off the face-off and puts in the overtime winner in Game 3, going in all alone. So that was his only goal. It was an overtime game winner. So that's why he's my rookie of the week. He also has 28 PIMs, and he averages 8 minutes on ice. So
he's got 30 PIMs.
He's up to 30 PIMs now. Way to go. So although he isn't putting up huge offensive stats, he's fitting in as far as the championship puzzle goes. His piece is fitting in perfectly.
Yeah, my only concern is the 7:56 time on ice per game. That's like, it's like, interesting. He's in the box more than he's on the ice. Good to know.
He's a fourth liner getting his job done.
I'm not denying that fact. I just said it's just like all right then.
Nick, your rookie of the week this week.
Well, my rookie of the week, I was going between two. I had Ilya Sorokin, but I'm actually going to go with Alexander Carrier from Nashville. Defenseman. He has 2 points in 4 games so far for the Preds. But what astounds me, and I know they've played 2 double overtime games, so I'm going to put this into perspective after. He's played 26-28 per game. That's great numbers. And I know there's obviously extended numbers because of the double overtimes. But he's 4th on a very good Nashville defensive core in time on ice. He's 4th on Nashville, period, in time on ice. And he's a positive, despite being on the ice for almost 26 minutes a game. That's a really good stat for this young player. He's looked confident. He's looked composed on the Nashville back end. So I went with Carrier, although huge shout out to Sorokin because he had a great week as well for the Islanders.
And I would have to go forward with him if I'm the Islanders. He's got to be the Islanders goalie moving forward here. So.
Well, you'd think, but crazier things have happened.
All right. Well, speaking of the goalies, let's get to the goalies. I'll lead us off with goalie of the week. I'm going with Philip Grubauer, 4-0 because the Avs swept the Blues. He had a 175 goals against average in the series, 936 save percentage, but the Avalanche do a great job limiting shots on net. So he just has to be steady Philip and everything goes fine. So he stopped 103 of 110 shot attempts from the Blues in the series. He also had an apple, so that's why he is my goalie of the week this week.
Just a wee little apple there, eh, Mike? Gotta love it.
All right, Mike, why don't you lead us off or go next with your goalie of the week?
Oh boy, I would say Alex Nedeljkovic again, but I gotta spice things up a little bit. So I'm going with Marc-Andre Fleury. Wow, what a playoffs he's had so far. In his only loss, he only gave up 1 goal, and that was in overtime. Since then, was it 3 goals against and 3 straight wins? He's been unbelievable in this series and shutting down the Minnesota Wild to a T. If there's any goalie that could potentially win the Conn Smythe this year, it has to be Marc-Andre Fleury because he's been outstanding so far in this playoffs.
Yeah, he's killing it, and it's what we talked about before the playoffs. Vegas needs Marc-Andre Fleury to be great, and so far, Marc-Andre Fleury has been great. Like it's so much fun to watch, and this is what you want to see in the playoffs: is teams being really, really good, and players playing really, really well. Well, Marc-Andre Fleury is the epitome of a team and a player playing really, really well come playoff time.
I think the Vegas Golden Knights want to start Lehner just based on contract. I've mentioned this before. Fleury is not giving them a chance to. And although the playoffs don't come into consideration, he's my Vezina winner this year. So Marc-Andre Fleury, great pick, Mike. Nick, who's your goalie of the week?
Well, my goalie of the week is actually coming from the North Division. I know it sounds crazy, the North Division having a goalie of the week, but Connor Hellebuyck has been phenomenal for the Winnipeg Jets. Phenomenal. 3 games, he's given up 5 goals against a team that has Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl on it. And I know that the team in front of him has played better than we expected. I'm not going to deny that fact. But when you still face 119 shots and only give up 5 goals, that's a positive for me. 958 save percentage and a 155 goals against average, Ryan. And he has a shutout as well.
Well, Winnipeg needed him to be Vezina Hellebuck, and he's done that.
He's been Vezina Hellebuck. Also, yeah. I'm going to keep giving shout outs to the people in our comments. Mataj V, again, coming in. Avs are just a well-oiled machine. I agree with you. That's why Grubauer looks so good.
They are a well-oiled machine. It's hard to envision someone beating them.
It's impossible to envision someone beating them right now.
Yeah, St. Louis didn't even have a sniff of a victory, it seemed like. So, all right, guys, let's get to our players of the week. These were the big hitters of the week. Nick, I don't think you've gone first yet, so player of the week.
I haven't gone first, and I will point out that my player of the week was taken by somebody else, and that's fine because they're getting recognition. So my backup player of the week is still a very good player, and we've already talked about him. It's Jonathan Huberdeau. Florida needed people to step up if they were going to beat Tampa. They haven't really beaten Tampa, but Huberdeau has stepped up. He has 8 points in 4 games. We already talked about that. He's averaging almost 20 minutes of ice time. He's winning 50% of his faceoffs, which is not a strength of his. He's giving them a fighting chance. They need a little bit more scoring outside of the top 3 guys, but you cannot blame Huberdeau for the state that they're in because he's given everything possible for that team right now.
When I watch Huberdeau out on the ice, I love his intensity and just coming through the screen. It looks like you can see his will to win, and he wants to just drag all the Panthers with them. I don't know if you agree, Mike, but I'm loving watching Huberdeau this playoff season.
I definitely agree. Huberdeau has been exceptional, and same with Barkov. You know, it's kind of disappointing that the Panthers don't get much love because I think if those 2 players were in a much better market, they'd be talked about in every single household. It's just a shame that they don't get as much attention, and the Panthers have not had much success up to this point. So yeah, no, it's been great to see. Huberdeau's been exceptional so far in these playoffs.
I think Mike listens to the podcast, Ryan? It's not like we haven't said that about 6 times.
That's the whole reason for our Barks and Hubie watch too. So, Mike, I think you took Nick's player for player of the week. That's why you had to go with Huberdeau, but make it official here.
It's Nathan MacKinnon. That's probably the easiest choice that I've had to make because he's been leading the NHL playoff in scoring so far with 9, 6 of them being goals. 2 of the goals were game winners. He's exactly the kind of player that you want to see. He's one of the best in the world for a reason. And it's kind of crazy to me that he kind of becomes an afterthought throughout the regular season because of how well McDavid was doing and how well Austin Matthews was doing. MacKinnon is always there, always one of the best players in the league each and every single year. It's a damn shame he hasn't won a Stanley Cup or even come close to one to this point. And I think he's on a mission this year to try and snap that drought and hoist his first Stanley Cup.
And you mentioned it, and Ryan, you talked about Huberdeau looking like he's just on a mission to carry the Florida Panthers. Nathan MacKinnon looks like he's on a mission to carry the Colorado Avalanche deep into this playoffs. And he has a bit more help, I will say that. But he looks so determined and so focused right now.
MacKinnon has a few more willing participants where Florida may need a few people to be convinced to be dragged into the fight there. But yeah, MacKinnon's a fantastic choice. I'll finish this off. My player of the week, Kucherov from the Lightning. He had 9 points. 3 of those were goals. I did mention before, 6 of his 9 points were on the power play. So he's still putting up points and being very valuable to his team. I think that helps bring up his points. So I don't think he's quite up to speed as the rest of the players on the ice, but he's still holding his own. He's not a negative player out there. He's not taking away from his team. So he's still getting the job done. So like I mentioned, 3 even strength points, 6 power play points, and he also has a 27.3 shooting percentage. So just keep throwing him out there. Tampa's going to be fine. I feel like they are going to get past the Panthers, but that is the chaos series. You never know what could happen there. Mike Kucherov, what do you think?
Kucherov has not missed a step at all since he's come back from his injury. There's always that question of like, how is he going to do in his first game back? Should he have even sat out the entire season, considering how well he's been playing throughout this series so far? And no, he's been absolutely great. We definitely missed him during the regular season. It would have been great to see what he could have done in the Central Division. And I think Tampa's record was kind of held back because of the fact that Kucherov was missing. Who's to say that they would have home ice advantage if Kucherov even played a couple of games this season? So yeah, no, he's been fun to watch. The league is always better when Kucherov is playing and healthy. Same thing with Stamkos, who's also had injury problems the last couple of years. So yeah, no, Tampa has got a lot of great players, and Kucherov's leading the way.
Yeah, and to comment on what you said about him only having goals on the power play, they have 9 goals even strength. They have 7 power play goals. On even strength, you're going to be going up against the other team's top line and the other team's top defensive pair if you're Kucherov. So I'm not surprised that he doesn't have a goal 5-on-5. He still has looked good. Like, it's not like he's looked out of place 5-on-5. So I am totally okay with it, him having all 3 of his goals on the power play.
Is there any word on whether or not if he's playing Game 5? Because he was taken off the ice. He missed some time in Game 4 when he went down. I haven't heard anything or seen anything yet, though.
I haven't seen anything yet. Sorry, there it goes. Headline on NHL.com. Kucherov will play Game 5.
Done deal. There you go. Now we've seen something, so we can.
Now I've seen it.
All right, it is time. We will be getting into our 3 hot, 3 not. For those of you who are watching us on Twitch, we encourage you to get involved in the chat if we miss anything with our players of the week or coming up with our 3 teams for 3 hot, 3 not here. Definitely let us know in the chat if you have differing opinions. We'd love to hear that, but let's fire it up right now. 3 hot, 3 not. Nick, you have to take the negative side of things. You list your 3 not hot teams, and we'll go to Mike after each team and get his opinion on these teams, and then I'll bring us back up with 3 hot teams.
All right, if I must. Well, let's start off with number 3 on the not list, the not hot list. I'm going with Montreal, and I know they won a game, so you got to take this. You got to follow my train of thought here. I thought Game 2 they just looked not great. Like, Toronto looked like a significantly better team in Game 2, and it concerns me the goals numbers, and that's where I'm looking at. They have 3 goals in 2 games, and 2 of them came in Game 1 when they didn't need a whole lot of offense. Well, the next game, they gave up 5 goals. That's a concern. So through 2 games, you're giving up 3 goals on average a game. That's not good enough in the playoffs. The power play is anemic at, a grand total of 0%. And the penalty kill is only operating at 80% against a team that has scored on the power play for the first time in what it feels like the whole season almost. I know it's not, but you get what I'm saying. Those are not good numbers. And when you are getting outshot 35-26 through 2 games, like per game, that's not good. So Montreal is my number 3, Mike.
Yeah, they definitely are in a tough spot. It certainly didn't help when, before the series started, they scratched Cole Caulfield and Jesperi Kotkaniemi for Game 1. Now, obviously, they won that game, and there's who knows the reason why for that, if that has to play with the fact that those 2 players didn't play. But the fact that Jesperi Kotkaniemi did come in, scored a goal, it's just like, what is their plan? What is their focus? They just don't have a clear sense of direction of what they want this team to look like on a nightly basis. And going into Game 3, you're hearing 2 conflicting reports about who's scratched and who's not. So we know that Cole Caulfield is playing tonight. But I heard one report that Thomas Tatar is going to get healthy scratch. Then I heard another report that Eric Staal is getting injured and Thomas Tatar is playing. So it just goes to show you they're just they don't really have a clear sense of their identity going into this series. And I think that it's with they're having an interim head coach, a GM that's been there for so long, and he's on the hot seat just because he's been there for so long. It's just so hard to really give a grasp for the Montreal Canadiens and what they're going to be doing. And who's to say that by the end of tonight, Cole Caulfield will have a big game and it'll shut me up.
I totally agree with you. Like, Ducharme, he's interim head coach. I don't think he's doing anything right now to help himself. There was a lot of people scratching their heads about his choices as far as Game 1 scratches goes. Now it looks like by Game 3, those players, except for Romanov, will be back into the lineup. So what did you accomplish by scratching them? for game one there. I don't understand what they've gained from that. You're 1-1 in the series. If you're looking at it from Montreal's perspective, you split the first two in Toronto, and now you have home ice for the rest of the series.
There you go. That's what they accomplish.
That's what they accomplished. You're right, Nick. All right, who's your next team?
I'm sticking with the North Division, and I'm sorry, Edmonton. You are number 2 this week. It's just not good enough. It is not good enough. And they get the big game from McDavid and Draisaitl that they were waiting for in game 3, and you blow it. You can't blow it. And I'm going to say the same thing about my number 1 team later, but when you play the perfect game, you cannot lose the perfect game. And you got the perfect game from McDavid and Draisaitl. They were putting up points. Yes, McDavid didn't score, but he had 3 assists. Draisaitl had 2 goals. You can't waste that because you don't have any other scoring. Figure it out. You can't be going into the third period up 3-1 or 4-1 and lose it. Leafs. You just can't do it.
It's nice that there's another Canadian team that blew a 4-1 lead in a playoff game.
Yeah, Mike, how about your tweet last night?
Well, it's just kind of the truth. Edmonton's already blown a 4-1 lead a couple of years ago against the Anaheim Ducks, and they did it again, this time with probably the best team they've had in a long time. No excuses. Edmonton this year came to this season looking to prove that they can win with McDavid and Draisaitl and McDavid alone, and they haven't even won a single playoff game to this point. And their playoff season, their season is in jeopardy of ending tonight.
And the other numbers don't look good. 14.3% of the power play is not good enough when you have those 2 guys on it. And 60% penalty kill is not acceptable anytime. It's not acceptable.
All right, good choice there, Nick. I think Edmonton's probably done tonight. But who's your number 1 team? And I have a feeling I know where this is going.
Well, I mean, it couldn't have been anyone else this week. And it's very unfortunate because they came into the playoffs really, really hot. But the St. Louis Blues are the number 1 not hot team for the week. They gave up 20 goals in 4 games. They only scored 7 of their own. Their power play was at a modest 22.2%, so I'll give them credit there. But I just said 60% on the penalty kill was not good enough for Edmonton. Yeah, 50% is really not good enough then. And you're getting outshot 36-27 across all 4 games. The one game that they played really well was game 3. And if you look at the stats, they outshot Colorado. They didn't give up a whole lot of opportunities, and they still lost that game. That was what I was saying. When you play the perfect game against Colorado, you cannot let them capitalize on the few chances that they have. And St. Louis did, and they lost their perfect game. And when you come out of that, you're not going to respond in game 4, and they didn't. So unfortunately, St. Louis, you are number 1 on the not hot list this week. Thanks for playing. See you next year.
St. Louis had nothing in the series. There's nothing to add. And you know what? I'm anti-St. Louis. I was okay when they won the Stanley Cup. I'm now an anti-St. Louis guy, and the reason for that is Jordan Binnington. He's
No, you're anti-Binnington. Let's be fair. I don't think you're anti-St. Louis. You're just anti-Binnington.
He plays for St. Louis, so
yeah, but you're not actually anti the rest of the team.
No, I got nothing against the team, but yeah, St. Louis had nothing, and Colorado has everything, and that's why St. Louis is about to have a media day explaining why they couldn't get it done.
Yep. It's absolutely crazy how going into the playoffs, there was a high hopes that the Blues could face the Golden Knights in the first round, and that would be Pietrangelo facing off against his old team. How exciting of a series that would have been. Not only did St. Louis get the worst possible matchup they could have possibly wanted, they didn't even get a win. I'm not saying that they would have had a much better time against the Vegas Golden Knights, because clearly they're doing some tidy work against the Minnesota Wild. But just the fact that not only were we robbed of that series, but then we saw what St. Louis did in this series against Colorado. Yeah, Nick nailed it with this week.
Thank you.
All right. That was Nick Negative with the negative news.
Negative Nick.
It's now time to get to the 3 hot teams. It's almost a reflection of your list with a slight change here, Nick. But my number 3 team is the Winnipeg Jets. And I didn't pick them to win this series, but they've won the first 3 games. And I picked them to sweep tonight now based on that information. In the 3 games, they've scored 10 goals, only allowed 5. So the defense has done the work. As you mentioned, Nick, for the first 2 games, they shut out McDavid and Draisaitl. 44% on the power play for Winnipeg and 85.7% PK. They killed off 6 of 7 against the number 1 power play in the regular season. So Winnipeg gets my number 3 spot. They've played an excellent series to this point, Mike.
Yep, it's totally that. And Connor Helpbuck has finally returned to form at the perfect time. They cannot coast on game 4 because they have a glorious opportunity to just rest their players, get everyone fully healthy, especially Pierre-Luc Dubois and Nick Ehlers, who missed the first couple of games combined. So yeah, no, this is they've played exceptionally well. They've done an excellent job of shutting down McDavid and Draisaitl. They've made Mike Smith look very beatable, and if they sweep this series, however Montreal and Toronto goes, they're hoping that series goes the distance, and they have a chance to be the team that represents Canada going into the 3rd round. So yeah, this has been a great week for Winnipeg, and they're that close to making to the 2nd round.
And I agree too, Mike. You nailed it on the head. Ryan, you explained it perfectly. So move on. Thanks, Winnipeg. You had a great week.
Close the book on Winnipeg for this week. Boston is my number 2 team. Now, technically, if we're playing by the rules, this is 3 hot from May 17th to 23rd. Boston lost game 1 before that time frame, so I guess I could say Boston was 4-0-0 during the time frame here, but I will say they were 4-0-1. They did not lose a game in regulation against Washington. They scored 16, only allowing 10 in the 5 games. That's an excellent goals against average, and they were 26.3% on a power play. That's a very good power play percentage. 85.7% on the PK, killing off 18 of 21. Very respectable. Boston looks like Boston, and that is very scary for every other team in the Stanley Cup playoffs.
Yeah, it's certainly been great to watch them. Having the Pastrnak, Marchand, and Bergeron line return to form has been great to see as well. They obviously had a bit of a slow start because Pastrnak missed some time, and I think they slowly started to figure things out. And then by the end, obviously, they had that great run just before the playoffs started, and they took full advantage of a capital scene, which I mentioned earlier was a complete disarray and complete lack of there's a lot of tension going on in the locker room for sure. So to be able to bounce back from that overtime loss in game 1 and play the way they did for the next 4 games, they definitely are the 2nd best team of this week.
Yeah, and you the next team that's going to play them, either Pittsburgh or New York, you're concerned. Like you're looking at the big bad Bruins again, which we didn't really expect the big bad Bruins to be the big bad Bruins going into this year. Well, they're back and they're ready to go, and they're ready for a run. And if Rask can keep playing like Rask is able to play, expect a deep one.
Well, my number 1 team, I mean, Nick, your number 1 not hot team is St. Louis, so I think obviously my number 1 hot team has to be the Colorado Avalanche. It's just a reverse of all the stats that you mentioned. So Colorado scored 20 goals in the 4 games, only allowing 7, going 50% on the power play, killing off 7 of 9 PK opportunities for 77.8%. Colorado was just easily the better team in this series, and I think we've already mentioned it here throughout the entire podcast from what we've been saying. But Mike, I don't know if there's anything else to add to this Colorado team who's just steamrolled St. Louis, I'd say.
If you didn't think that they were the Stanley Cup favorite for this year, this series should have proved it. So yeah, if you have to be putting a lot of money on Colorado because they are a team that really wants to win the Stanley Cup this year. They want to take full advantage of McKinnon, Mikko Rantanen, and Landeskog's prime, and obviously Cale Makar as well. Like I can't think of a team that should not be in the Stanley Cup Finals this year. And if Colorado doesn't make it, it'll be one of the biggest crimes of in sports history.
Okay, I'm a Colorado fan. I don't even know if I would say that just because I think that West Division is so good, no matter who they play in the next round, Minnesota or Vegas, is going to be stiff competition. I think whoever comes out of this West Division wins, just because that's how good the 3 teams that we're talking about have been this year. So, yes, Colorado is clearly the number 1 team so far in the playoffs, and they were the number 1 team in the regular season. Not by much. Let's make that very clear. They're going to be tested next round, but if they get out, expect them to go through. Like I just expect them to win out after that.
It'll definitely be very interesting. All right, that was 3 hot, 3 not for the week of May 17th to the 23rd. It's about time to close out the show, but before we do, we must fire up the randomizer. Here we go. We are playing Who Am I today on the show. I think
it's like every time Mike is here, we're playing Who Am I?
Mike was on the show. We played Who Am I, but the randomizer has come up with Who Am I. So this is pretty much a 20 questions situation. The way we'll work it this week is I will come up with a hockey personality. That's either a player, a broadcaster, someone in management, something who has to do with professional hockey. And Mike, you and Nick work together to come up with 20 yes or no questions to try and figure out who my hockey personality is. There's no time limit on this, but there is a question limit. I will keep track of the questions. You guys,
as will I, just to make sure he's not cheating.
Go ahead when you're ready.
Mike, you lead us off, bud.
Okay. So is this player still active?
No.
So that makes it easier.
This was a player, correct?
Yes, that's question number 2.
I'm just making sure because it could be a personality, and I want to clarify that it was a player. So, Mike, go again.
Mike was confident. He dove in with both feet.
I know, but I know you, Ryan. So,
okay. Did this player play in the 2010s?
Yes.
Okay.
Did this player also play in the 1990s?
Yes.
Okay. There we go, Mikey. We're on a good track here.
Okay. Did he play on a team that got relocated in the last 10 years?
No. Good question. I like that question. That's a solid question. No is the answer to that. And just as we're going here, I will mention there's a bit of a theme here. And so this is kind of a free hint. The theme to this player, Stanley Cup final. That's the theme.
Final.
Yeah.
Okay.
Stanley Cup final.
That's a bit of a free hint.
Okay, it's a guy who played in the... Did he win the cup?
Yes, he has.
Okay.
6 questions in.
I think we're making good progress here, Mikey.
Okay. Did he win his Stanley Cup in the 2000s?
Yes, he did.
Okay.
Has he won more than one cup?
Good question, Nick. Let me try and figure that out right now.
Because that'll narrow it down significantly if he has.
I have the benefit of staring at this player on Hockey DB. And no, I think he's only won the one Stanley Cup.
Okay. Now I have some ideas of who this might be, but I think I need some more questions to get closer to that.
We got 12 more, Mike, so.
Yeah. 12 more.
Did he play on a California team?
He has not played on a California team.
Ooh, okay.
When he won his cup, was it a Western Conference team or an Eastern Conference team?
It's not a yes or no question, Nick.
Was it a Western Conference team?
No.
Okay, so Eastern Conference in the 2000s, Mikey.
Ooh, good job narrowing it down, Nick. I like that thinking.
Was he a captain?
You want to be more specific with that question?
On the team that he won the Stanley Cup on, was he the captain?
No.
Okay. I had another idea in mind, but I guess it wasn't.
Okay, Mikey, let's go through the Eastern Conference champions in the 2000s. Who do we got?
So if I'm not mistaken, yeah, Tampa for sure. Carolina, Pittsburgh, New Jersey. I think that's it.
Was this player a forward?
Yes. 8 questions to go.
I have an idea. I'm just going to look something up.
Did this player also win the Conn Smythe in that year that his team won the Stanley Cup?
Ooh, good question. I'm going to need 5 seconds to look that up.
Okay, good, because that gives me time to see if I'm right.
Unofficially, I'm going to say no, but I really want to get the proper answer here.
Okay, don't worry. I'm still checking something, so you go ahead.
No, he did not.
Okay.
What do we got? 7 questions to go.
All right.
He wasn't the captain. Wasn't the Conn Smythe winner.
Okay.
He was on an Eastern Conference team.
Okay. I think I might have it, but I'm going to try this. Is he born in Quebec?
He is not born in Quebec.
Okay. Then I'm off. Never mind.
6 questions to go. If there's anybody in the Twitch chat who's watching live who wants to take a guess, that would be awesome.
Yeah, take your guess. Let's see what you guys come up with.
Yeah,
I'm the only one who can see the chat right now. So,
so Nick's just gonna take the answer.
No, I'll give full credit. I'll give full credit.
Come on, Nick. We gotta. I'm kidding.
Okay, we got 6 questions left, Mikey.
Okay. Did he score an overtime goal? And bonus question: Did this win the Stanley Cup?
Yes. That was 2 questions.
That's 2. That's fine. Yeah, that's 2. That's 2.
I'm gonna say 4 questions left to go.
Okay.
So you got the next 2. Do you know who it is?
I have some idea, but I'm gonna. How about you ask another one?
Oh no, I was gonna. If you have an idea, go for it.
I don't feel fully confident though. That's why I said you take it away.
In the 2000s, wasn't there only one series that was won on an overtime goal? One Stanley Cup final that was won on an overtime goal? Trying to cycle through my head here quickly. Yeah, there was only one. I think that was won on an overtime goal.
Really? I thought there was 2.
No, there was only one. Huh. In the 2000s.
In the 2000s, yeah, okay.
So 2000 to 2009, there was only one Stanley Cup final that was won on an overtime goal.
I got nothing, Mike, so if you got another question, ask it.
Figure that out, and that's your player.
If I ask this question, I think I'll know who it is.
Okay.
Did he play on the New Jersey Devils?
Yes, he did.
Is it Jason Arnott?
It is Jason Arnott.
Attaboy!
Let's go.
Beautiful. All right, Jason Arnott. He did score the overtime winning goal, Game 6 against the Dallas Stars, and 2 years later, he was promptly traded to the Dallas Stars. So, Jason Arnott, and he was a captain at some point in his career. I forget with who, but it wasn't on that Dallas or that New Jersey Devils team. So,
see, I was thinking Le Cavalier. That's why I asked the Quebec question, because he started in '98, won a cup, and then kind of traveled around.
Right. Yeah, but he didn't score that.
No, I know that was, but we didn't ask that question at that point, Ryan. I didn't have that information.
Fair enough. Yeah, that was the only series in the 2000s that ended on an overtime cup winning goal. So there is the horn that brings an end to this 20 minutes on ice. First off, Mike, thank you for joining us. You can find Mike on Twitter at the Leafs IMO. You can also hear him on Behind the Net podcast. He's also a contributor to LeafsReport.com. I think I got everything there. You can find me on Twitter at Ryan_H16. You can find Nick on Twitter at Nick McVicker. And you can find the show on Twitter and Instagram at 20 Minutes on Ice. Thank you for everyone who followed us live today on Twitch. You can also download the podcast regularly wherever you get your favorite podcasts. And be sure to head on over to GarageDoorSports.com and find us and all of the other GDS shows under the shows tab. We will be back again next week. You can find us again live on Twitch or download the podcast as usual. Until then, thank you for listening. Goodbye, everybody. There we go.